um, under these circumstances, and I guess I want to harken back to when he was rookie of the year. This has probably been the most challenging circumstance aside from his personal situation regarding his wife. This to me has been the most challenging circumstance because he was specifically brought to Milwaukee not only to compliment Giannis, but to keep Giannis in Milwaukee, right? Like there is a level of pressure that is, that is amassed with that task of responsibility. Drew Holiday is no fool, right? He was kind of similar to that circumstance when he was in New Orleans, right? Like he had to kind of capitulate to the idea that their next star is Zion Williamson, right? And technically, the heart and soul of the New Orleans Pelicans at that time was Drew Holiday. He helped build the maturity of Anthony Davis. He's been responsible, if you really think about it, Shaw, for some of the most premier big men in the game of basketball right now. And so I think that this is a different tier of pressure for a guy like Drew Holiday because this is with expectations that Giannis Antetokounmpo, who has become a multiple MVP person and is expected to take the Milwaukee Bucks eventually to an NBA Finals, he is that complementing piece. He is supposed to be part of that big piece to the puzzle that Giannis has been demanding for the longest time. And I think that he has been able to take all that pressure quite well. I kind of went on that tangent to say, this is the reason why I think you have to look at these matchups between the Bucks and the Nets in a different prism, so to speak, because you have to compartmentalize what each guy's responsibilities truly are for us to really dig into how big a deal this is when they play against each other and if they eventually do run into each other come playoff time. Because it's not going to be just about the numbers. Because some guys are going to actually have to take less shots, but are going to have to step up on the defensive side of the basketball. Some guys are going to probably not have to shoot the three ball more, but may have to facilitate key passes and have to play critical minutes with the second team in order to keep their team in a position to win. And you're kind of seeing a lot of that on display. Look at Blake Griffin. Look at DeAndre Jordan. A lot of these guys are playing different roles that we're not really talking about, that I think is kind of culminating this big storyline about if these two guys actually do get it on in the playoffs, how big a deal it's really going to be, because it's not just going to be about what we've seen in the greatness of Durant and with Antetokounmpo. So what I'm seeing from Drew Holiday is the thing that I said from the very, very beginning, Shaw, about what we said about Drew Holiday back when we had these conversations. I was like, Drew Holiday is a 5'2" basketball player. You can put him on the court. He could basically do everything well. But at times, he is so good that he doesn't do all of the things you need when it's necessary, and it diminishes his value to what he really should be bringing to the table for a team like, say, the Milwaukee Bucks. So what he's doing right now, given the circumstances, Shaw, I think he's exceeded expectations. I don't know what people want. I don't know what they're asking for. But what I'm seeing from Drew Holiday, I got to feel like, man, going into playoffs, you got to feel real, real good if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, because he's your ace in the hole. He's the bridge between what you're going to see from Middleton and Antetokounmpo when the Bucks are going to be tested and are going to be pushed to the wall. He's going to be the equalizer.
Yeah, I agree. He's not one of those, all right, he's going to drop 12, 15 assists on a nightly basis, but he can. He's smart. He's patient, especially on the offensive end. And then he's a bulldog defensively, kind of one of those, what do you call that, wiry strong, right? Like he just kind of he's not going to back down to anybody. And he communicates. He does all the things that a Coach Bud defense needs. But like I said, I think his biggest contribution, well, not like I said, but I think part of his biggest contribution is what he's doing to help pace and give them another third option that Bledsoe wasn't able to really do offensively. Bledsoe would get downhill and try to get his bodies into people, and every now and then he would knock down the three. But Holiday just has a little bit more level of consistency and just plays at, I think, a nice, more even keel and pace, even while Bledsoe gave them some defensive well, too. He wasn't Drew Holiday defensively. So one of the things I want to transition to a little bit, too, kind of sticking on the Bucks, and it really is more, I guess, how the Nets have been playing the Bucks in these two games. You see DeAndre Jordan matched up with Giannis a lot. Some of our other podcasts and friends and people out there, media socialites, if you will, are saying that, hey, this might be Steve Nash and the and the Nets baiting Giannis, right? Because it is the dog days of the regular season, getting towards the end, and they don't necessarily want to tip their hand as play against Giannis in the playoffs. Or even if this is what it is, they're baiting him into being able to shoot these wide open threes and uncontested jumpers. DeAndre's giving him a lot of space. And Giannis, to his credit, has been knocking it down for the better part of the game and a half here, with a couple exceptions. So what do you think about Brooklyn's defense on Giannis and how Giannis is actually responding to that?
Just be glad that you're Brooklyn, that you've got these regular season games to toy with what's going on. Because I don't subscribe to the idea of experimentation unless you have absolute confidence that you're able to execute even the most basic level of whatever concept you're bringing to the table defensively. Now, the Brooklyn Nets so far, Shaw, have shown me through the course of this NBA 2020-21 season that their defense is going to be a question mark going into. If you're going to ask me what their kryptonite is going to be, it's going to be what kind of defense do they decide to bring that night against whoever they're playing against. You know what I'm saying? And maybe they may hope for the opposing team to just not have it that night, not shoot the ball well, not get to the basket well, whatever. You cannot.
Hold on. Okay, let me pause you real quick with that, because one of the many shows and other shows that I consume, they talked about Brooklyn's defense, and I was like, wow, that might not be a terrible point. Brooklyn cannot be historically bad defensively and win an NBA championship. They cannot do that. They can be average because they are historically good offensively, or can be historically good offensively if all three pieces are there. So if they end up being, instead of bottom third, into middle of the pack, even 14th, maybe even 16th, if you will, it's not the typical formula that we see where, okay, defense wins championships. Like, you kind of shake your fist. Oh, you have to be at least a top 10 defensive team to win an NBA championship. I agree and subscribe to it. And I believe it might have been Zach Harper who was saying it on the NBA show when I heard it. And I was like, I think that's a valid point. They just can't be historically bad. They can be average, or maybe even middle of the road, less than average, but they just can't be lower third bad defensively and still win if they have all three guys clicking offensively. And I kind of subscribe to that. So I think, when you're saying, okay, you're worried about their defense, do you subscribe to that theory that it can't be historically bad, or do you feel like it still needs to be top 10?
No, I don't think it needs to be top 10, but it certainly can't be top 20, right? Like, it's got to be within, top 15 to me is reasonable, because everybody's scoring the basketball. The problem is that you're doing it now against the same team who will make adjustments as per game. So it ain't like, okay, you had a bad night. Glad we're not seeing those guys come Tuesday if you played them on Sunday, or you played them Monday and you're turning around playing them again, whatever, right? Like, you're playing the same team that's read you from the game before and is going to make the adjustments coming in. Where have we seen so far this season, with the exception of certain moves being made by Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets, bringing in certain players, certain guys coming off of injuries, where we have seen that their top tier players, right, if they don't have it offensively, have been able to step up defensively. That's not how this Brooklyn Nets team is built. That to me is part of the key, Shaw. We're not talking about Kevin Durant when he was playing with the Golden State Warriors, that style type of defense. And he's not playing with this certain cast of players that understand that playing at least a defensively efficient basketball style while your offense is at a high octane will get you to a championship. There are a lot of unknown parts here. DeAndre Jordan ain't the ball stopper that he used to be when he was playing with the Los Angeles Clippers. When has Blake Griffin ever been a ball stopper, right? But Steve Nash is asking him to ball stop Giannis Antetokounmpo at times. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of experimentation going on, and that's the reason why I'm saying that if you are watching this game, you got to watch it within a confined amount of skepticism. Not to say that you don't buy into the hype, right? But what I am saying is that the Brooklyn Nets still have not shown me the ability to understand themselves well enough to be as consistent on a defensive level that makes anyone feel comfortable that they can execute the same way that we're talking about how the Bucks can execute offensively, like how they've been doing these last couple of nights against the Brooklyn Nets. You know what I'm saying? And so my concern more than anything is not even on the Shamits and the Claxtons. I mean, Steve Nash is going to need those guys. He's going to need the DeAndre Jordans on this squad because he doesn't know what he's going to get defensively from his star players. And you know what? He can't ask any more than what he's probably going to get from them because if you really think about it, Durant, Irving, and Harden are so injury prone that to demand them to do something from a defensive perspective actually commands more physical accountability than it would be for what they do offensively efficiently in their own zone, right? So that's the reason why I'm a little skeptical about where Brooklyn is as it pertains to them being defensive. Now, I see Matt has said he's not sold, on the Bucks because they have a losing record against above 500 basketball teams, primarily against the Western Conference. I hear you, Matt. I feel you, but I ain't even thinking about the Bucks and somebody against the Western Conference because they got to get to the Eastern Conference Finals before we even start talking about whoever they're gonna play against in the West. And the last time I checked, the Miami Heat ain't nothing to sniff at. The Philadelphia 76ers ain't nothing to sniff at. And obviously the Brooklyn Nets are nothing to sniff at. And it don't matter if Milwaukee looks good in the regular season against any of these teams. It's what they don't do in the playoffs. It's why Horst got Holiday on that roster. Now it's got to mean something when they get into the playoffs. But what I'm seeing from what Holiday has been giving us and what I'm seeing from Middleton and Antetokounmpo and the surrounding cast, you're beginning to see that these guys are starting to do things differently. And to me, it's a little bit more viable. It's a little bit more believable, right? Brook Lopez playing defense, that's not coming out of thin air. That is a conscious understanding that he is not going to probably shoot the basketball as much as everyone thought he was doing last year. But he's going to have to be on that court, basically establishing a front court presence. And to me, that's going to be the important things that we want to see from the Milwaukee Bucks if we're going to buy into them being a contender for this year's run to the title.
Well, Lopez is, as we've outlined on some of our shows, he's one of the league leaders consistently in contested shots each year. So whether that's, him helping and because he's involved in so many pick and rolls or him just kind of being a help defender in the paint, he's consistently one of the league leaders in contested shots. And that's kind of a testament to him as a pseudo, I won't say anchor of that defense because Giannis was defensive player of the year.
Does Budenholzer know that though? Does Budenholzer know that?
I would hope so. I mean, you have to, trust your stats.
I know you know that because you are the brains, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? You're the brains behind that. The reason why I say that, Shaw, is how many times, I guess, do we often see where Brook Lopez winds up being out of a play offensively, defensively, right? Positioning, wherever the case may be, because it's so Budenholzer, right? For him to think so much about the offense that, listen, in key situations, in key moments, you need a stop. You put your best players out there that are going to help you get a stop, right? And sometimes I think he gets in his own way of being able to offer that kind of execution because he overthinks the situation too many times, right? And again, this is an offensively, catered league right now. But these type of defensive notes, right? These aromatic notes of defense that we're talking about, Shaw, they may not mean much to the regular season, but they damn sure going to mean something when these guys actually have to get it on in the playoffs.
Well said. 81-76, Milwaukee leading the Nets here. 4:35 left here in the third quarter. Couple of threes just exchanged. Watching as Tucker feeds to Connaughton, who's shot Durant. One of the things is, as we kind of stay on the Milwaukee train here a little bit, is Holiday again playing great, and I'm watching PJ Tucker, and similar to, I don't know, maybe not similar to, but I kind of liken the move to get him. I was like, all right, it's PJ Tucker. I don't think it's as great a move as most of the NBA Twitter world believes it is, but I think he's going to have some moments in this. And as we're kind of talking about Milwaukee and their defense, it makes me wonder. It's like, well, it can be a pretty stout defensive unit if you're going with Drew Holiday, you're going with Chris Middleton, Giannis, Lopez, and Tucker as maybe a closing five.
Let me ask you. I want to ask you this question because I'm so happy that you brought up PJ Tucker, because I've been on the fence about this. I think when we talked about this move, I said I don't know where they're going with this or what they were trying to accomplish in bringing over PJ Tucker, but you can make the argument that the Bucks defensively have played a lot better in the second half of the season prior to Tucker coming on board. I don't know if he's the reason of it, but I'm really curious from you, Shaw. I want to get your take on this. If we have to start talking about a matchup, right? Let's say that this is the Nets versus the Bucks with a healthy Harden playing for the Nets. Who do you have matched up against who from a one-on-one perspective? How do you have the defensive alignment set up for the Bucks against against that starting five against the Brooklyn Nets?
It's me, boy. It's never an easy answer. I think the best defensive gives star players multiple looks. And while there are times you'll see all right, that's your guy, you're gonna go try to bulldog and lock him down. I think if you are truly, truly elite, there's no defense that can really, really stop you. So, and I think with Brooklyn in that situation, that you'll have to switch up your look on Harden and Kyrie and Durant. So in this, as we're watching the games, Tucker, when he's in, he's primarily checking KD, right? He's not out there. There's no Harden for him to check.
Do you like that matchup? Do you subscribe to that matchup, PJ Tucker against KD?
No, I don't. KD dropped 42 the last game, and has 20 something right now. So I don't think Tucker really bothers KD in that way. I think that's more where Giannis, because of his length, should probably be taking on that role. But I think Budenholzer's not ready to maybe show that hand right now in these regular season games on his side. As much as we've been talking about maybe the Nets trying to bait Giannis some, maybe Bud is like, hey, you know what? We're gonna have to switch things up. So I think Tucker may be trying to guard Harden at some points. Maybe switching on to KD at times, and then you still have Middleton you can throw into the mix as well too. So I think those semblance of those cross matches are going to be pretty impactful. Not to mention when Harden gets back, Drew Holiday may not spend as much time on Kyrie because Harden is really the catalyst of the Brooklyn offense when he's healthy. So you'd probably want Holiday trying to stop their offense initiator in Harden more so than what he does against Kyrie. Against Kyrie in these two games here right now too. I know and feel and believe Milwaukee has more defensive stoppers for sure than Brooklyn does, but Brooklyn's offense is so elite that you're going to continue to have to shift the paradigm a little bit. You cannot just say, all right, you guard him, and that's what you do for the next 40 minutes. You'll have to give all those guys some different looks at different points during a game or definitely during the series if they end up playing each other in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I like how you assessed, what you could potentially see. I flat out just see it in this particular regard. I would like to see Middleton on Irving. I like to see Drew on Harden, and I want to see Giannis on KD. Now, where does that leave Tucker? Well, again, we often talk about how we're relying so much on what the superstars are going to give you. In the playoffs, it's all about what matchups are going to be left that actually turn into mismatches, right? Blake Griffin actually has an odd opportunity to be a mismatch problem for the Brooklyn Nets if Steve Nash comes around to the idea of heavily using Blake Griffin on that second team, probably on the floor with a Kyrie Irving or with the James Harden. Can't be on the floor same time with Kevin Durant. I just don't see the flow. I don't see where there's that chemistry there. And I do think that if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, part of what's going to be key for you is your ability to prevent teams who don't have assets to make those runs. This is part and parcel of what happened to them against the Miami Heat. Obviously, they were horrible in that series. But what didn't help them is the one thing that you thought the Milwaukee Bucks definitely had over these last few seasons was that they had a top 10 defense, meaning, listen, even if their offense was trash, they could at least look like they wanted to stop people. They couldn't even stop the Miami Heat's second unit, right? And obviously that's an exposed weakness against a team like that. So that to me is where part of my, focus is going to be on. If you are the Milwaukee Bucks and you got a ball stopper guy like PJ Tucker, you don't have to run PJ Tucker out against every conceivable person on your starting five just because he's PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker could be a valuable asset stopping everybody else and only allowing your team to focus on minimizing the offensive juggernaut that is the Brooklyn Nets, their tres leches. You know what I'm saying? Remember, the Boston Celtics did that when they had James Posey. Posey did not come in with the intent to take over and do what Kevin Garnett was already anchoring this team to do, but he was a fixture in his ability to help those guys off the bench with critical stops because that was the calling card for the Boston Celtics. So to me, I feel like you get the same thing from a guy like PJ Tucker. You don't got to run him out there to be the ball stopper against every premier player that's on the roster. Because if you look at the teams that they're going to be matched up against, there are multiple star players on those rosters. So what are you going to do? Run PJ Tucker out there so you can get 3, 4, 5 quick fouls and he be absolutely mean nothing for you for the course of an NBA game? That to me is part and parcel on Budenholzer and how he is trying to deploy his defensive players, to stop guys and to get stops and things of that nature.
Yeah, the notion of PJ Tucker as more of a help defender as opposed to an on-ball defender against Brooklyn specifically, I think is one that could potentially work, especially if Drew, Chris, and Giannis are playing at a level that they feel like, all right, well, we're just going to check these guys because we're the three main guys, so we got to go and check their three main guys as well too. The issue I think is like it just like you said is what lineup is Brooklyn deploying out there with those three guys. So is it a combination of Blake and Joe Harris? Is it Jeff Green and Joe Harris, Jeff Green and DeAndre? And that will determine how much help PJ can give because maybe you feel like you can help off of Jeff Green. You're not leaving Joe Harris. you can't come in the lane to do that because he will wet you. If Bruce Brown's in the game like he is right now, then sure, maybe that's a guy you take your chances. All right, hey, Bruce Brown, you beat us. Landry Shamet, maybe a lot less than Joe Harris, but probably not. You don't want to leave him wide open, so to speak. So I think there's some viability to it. But as we're looking at the game right now, 85-81, Tucker is primarily matched up on KD. That's his assignment, and that's what we're seeing for now. But it leads to the overall question that we always talk about with Milwaukee. As KD just knocks down a three, making it a 1-point game, 2:08 left to play. Adjustments. And will Bud have the requisite chops to make the damn adjustments that are necessary in a matchup, whether that's Brooklyn or anybody else? And that's what we all are waiting to see. I think we talked about Milwaukee a little bit. Hold on 1 second. Talk about Milwaukee a little bit, that they've changed their offense around. They are allowing spacing. They're not just allowing Giannis to just go one-on-one, so to speak, and figure it out or post up, kind of at that mid-post where that half spin and that turn is coming. They're trying to involve him in more actions offensively, but they will have to also switch up their defenses as well, too, as Tucker tries to draw a charge to no avail. 88-84, 129 left here in the third quarter of Milwaukee. Go ahead, Marco.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of go back on the play. It was actually a few moments ago when Durant shot that three ball. This is what I'm talking about, where the Milwaukee Bucks are not the Milwaukee Bucks is what they used to be. Remember, the Milwaukee Bucks have allowed teams to shoot the three ball on them a hell of a lot more than normally, right? And in that situation where Durant gets a wide open look three because of ball movement, yes. But look at the guys that they had on the floor who defensively are tasked with staying at home. Bobby Portis, you know what I'm saying? Connaughton. Again, if you're and this is where part of my thing is like, if you're a guy like PJ Tucker, you're on that floor, you got to be talking to these dudes, right? Like Bobby Portis has always been really recognized as an offensive player, not really a defensive principle kind of guy, right? Been bounced around. Connaughton, the guy has moments where, he could be a valuable player, and then he takes himself out of games because he's a defensive liability. And again, this is where all of this stuff has to get checked when we're talking about the Milwaukee Bucks, right? Like, if you're really serious about this is it, this is the run, this is the year we're going to do it. I understand it's only a play, but it kind of just blows up the whole notion of what the Milwaukee Bucks have stopped doing. They were getting good at it a few years ago, and then they just damn near just said, you know what, just pump the brakes on it, right? Like, we're just not going to play that kind of defense anymore. You know who's very similar to that kind of thinking, Shaw? Boston Celtics. Remember a few years ago, Boston Celtics were one of the best teams defensively against the three, right? And it was in those years they were making deep runs into the Eastern Conference. Same thing when we're talking about here with the Milwaukee Bucks. If teams like the Brooklyn Nets are going to jack threes all the time, that's what they like to do. Or you got one of the better shooters of three on those teams. You have to do a better job of closing out defensively and making those make those shots tougher for them.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying, and I think Milwaukee, they seem to be trying to do a couple of high traps here to get Brooklyn to shift and pass the ball, as Kyrie now hits a wing three after kind of a broken play that Milwaukee was playing relatively good defense, but they found Kyrie pop up to the wing here. 92-90, Brooklyn leads as we're closing out here the third quarter. Chris Middleton gets fouled by Bruce Brown here. So, yeah, I agree. I think when it comes to the defense, Coach Bud has preached primarily stopping the three, and they're willing to kind of give up, those 2-pointers, right, and say, all right, beat us that way. I have to look, right, probably do a quick basketball reference check right now to kind of see where Milwaukee's at in defending the three this year, to see if that has truly waned from their overall psychological aspect and thinking from a defensive standpoint. But sometimes there's just nothing you can do. You know what I mean? Durant will hit a three over two guys and think nothing of it. He's a damn 7-footer, with elite level ball handling and shooting. And I think you just have to try to make it as difficult as possible, for guys like that, because you're probably not going to be able to do anything. A lot of interesting chatter going on in this game. Katie looks like he's having a lot of fun talking to Tucker, now talking to Thanasis as well too. And I don't know what the conversation is like, but that's why I wish we were able to have, kind of our own hot mic, on the courts as these conversations were going down.
Hey, there ain't no mic hotter than the one we got right here, baby. Our mic stay blazing. That's all there is to that.
Johnny Blaze.
Yeah,
92-91, 2.7 left here. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break as this quarter closes. We'll join you back here for the start of the fourth quarter. But yeah, man, keep the questions coming in. Matt, we see you. And we know we're going to make a couple of tweets out here, see if we get some more people in this chat and this conversation. So we'll be right back here after here for the start of the fourth quarter. A lot now. 97-94, 11-16 left here in the fourth quarter. Brooklyn makes a late run to end the third quarter, knocking down a couple of threes to take the lead. Chris Middleton here on a nice dribble drive gets Joe Harris to commit a foul here on the turnaround spinning driving layup. Man, let's talk a little bit about the first, let's talk about our boy Matt here with the Ice Young.
Shout outs to Matt. That's when you know someone's listening to our show. Ice Tray.
That's the man's nickname, bro.
Get out of here with that crap.
Icy Young with the icy hots,
AKA,
all right.
AKA Frigidaire.
Blake Griffin knocking down a corner three. 195. Brooklyn takes the lead. Well, continues to maintain the lead here. 10:50 left to play. You talked a little bit about Blake as Giannis fires up another three, misses. Joe Harris with the rebound. I really am intrigued by both teams and their supporting cast. And, which cast will be more important, not just in a series against each other, but just kind of holistically. One of the things that you touched on a little bit a while ago in our own broadcast was, the Nets are bringing this one out and this one out. And I think I talked about it on our show too. I've been really impressed by almost every addition Brooklyn has made. Like, everything has kind of worked. And they've plugged and played guys around whichever star was healthy at that time and kind of just made it work. As Mike James knocks down a three from the wing.
Mike James
just gets here, and he's playing well. They had stretches where Timothy Luwawu was playing well for them. Jeff Green has given them great contributions. Joe Harris is an elite level 3-point shooter, so we don't necessarily need to not be surprised by that. But Blake, Brendan Haywood made a great comment on NBA TV. It's kind of like his thing right now. Ever since Blake Griffin got to Brooklyn, he's like, oh, Blake Griffin would just kind of Kaiser Soze the Detroit Pistons. Kind of like, oh, doesn't know what he's doing, and now he's going to come to Brooklyn and kind of give them quality minutes in the time that he's going to get out there. But overall, this supporting cast for Brooklyn, I think, has been pretty phenomenal. A guy like Nicholas Claxton only has gotten 5 minutes thus far tonight. Alize Johnson, I don't know if he's on injured or reserve with Kiffy, but he hasn't touched the floor tonight. And a guy who dropped 20 and 20 a couple nights ago for them. Their supporting cast and quote unquote even cast offs, if you will, all can hoop. And I don't know if that's a result of practicing every day against the likes of KD and Kyrie and James when he's healthy as well too. But there are no real scrubs on this Brooklyn team, even the guys that you don't quote unquote know by name and they're not household names. I just think what they've done holistically in bringing in the right pieces, I got to give Brooklyn a lot of credit, and to Steve Nash and D'Antoni and to everybody on that coaching staff who's kind of made it work. So it's a long-winded way of saying, like, I like Brooklyn's overall supporting cast. What do you think about that? And then maybe we can touch on Milwaukee a little bit as well.
Yeah, I really do like Brooklyn's supporting cast. I think obviously much has been made about, Brooklyn taking up or, monopolizing every conceivable buyout player that, after the trade deadline. And that could be a conversation for another time. But kudos to Steve Nash, because he's figured out a way to utilize guys like that and allow them to contribute in a positive way for a basketball team that I think a lot of people have high expectations in trying to get to an NBA Finals and possibly win a championship. I'll also say, Shaw, that you know what? You can make the same argument for the Milwaukee Bucks, right? Like, if you really think about it, the names on this roster are not blockbuster. Okay. Bryn Forbes, Bobby Portis, Jeff Teague. Bro, wasn't Jeff Teague playing for the Celtics? right? Like,
you act like you're surprised he like he just looked at the roster and didn't know he was there.
well, that's what it kind of feels like, because I thought
Yeah,
I
he was
thought
traded to Orlando, and then
right.
Orlando let him go, and he signed with Milwaukee.
I'm just saying, um, Thanasis, right? Obviously Tucker, but just a few moments ago before they went on timeout, we saw Dante DiVincenzo, have a TNT Tuesday primetime night moment, right? On two straight, on two straight. Yeah, exactly. This is what we're talking about, right? Like, I understand the focus is on Giannis has to be the man. He has to be all world. He's got to figure out a way, to get these guys, to take them to to another level. Yes, you can have those expectations, but this team is not going to go anywhere unless the guys that I'm just talking about are contributing in the same breath and manner, like how you were just talking about the contributions that the Brooklyn Nets have been getting from their role players. And so I have to say, like, I'm very impressed with how Budenholzer is finding ways to put these guys in a position for them to contribute for this team. The other thing you have to think about as well too, Shaw, like, I think everybody was so enamored with what those last 2 years of what the what the Milwaukee Bucks represented, and being like a 60-plus win type basketball team, that they made changes. They made some drastic changes. They changed their point guard backcourt situation and their role-playing point guard backcourt situation, right? Like, and then they added a couple of other, players on the roster who will be question marks in this culture that the Bucks have built. And yet they figured out a way for them to still be a top 3 team. They may wind up being a top 2 team in the Eastern Conference before it's said and done. Does that mean that there any, that we should be talking about, pack it in? I'm sure we'll still be speaking with a lot more confidence about the Bucks maybe making a run to the Eastern Conference Finals before we talk about, I don't know, the Atlanta Hawks or the Boston Celtics or the New York Knicks, right? Like, so they're kind of right where they need to be, This is the reason why the Brooklyn Nets are as they're constructed was to beat the teams like the Bucks and the Heats and the Sixers. That's why they're built like that. And the Bucks are playing to a level that they still believe that they're one of the top teams there. And it's really part and parcel because of the contributions that they're getting from their role players.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Brooklyn, I just feel like as long as they have one of those stars out there, they're always going to be formidable because they have high-level role players. All these guys know how to play in their offensive system when the stars are there, and know how to step up if the stars are not all there as well too. So, Jeff Green has had multiple 20-point games this year. Landry Shaman even has had a couple of those. DeAndre was playing well to begin the year. Well, he was getting minutes to begin the year, but now in a role where he's going to get spot minutes is probably thriving a little bit better as well too. So I just, Joe Harris has erupted obviously for multiple 20-point per game games this year as well too. They just get it done, and I really am impressed by that. So flipping over to the Milwaukee side, it is the DiVincenzos of the world. It is the Brent Forbes of the world. Forbes and Portis, I believe, were are amongst the leaders in 3-point percentage this year, right? And that says a lot about what they need to do. Now, can they give Milwaukee the requisite defense that is needed in second round and Eastern Conference type championship matchups? That remains to be seen because Milwaukee just needs to get there. But I think those guys can definitely get Milwaukee and elevate them in first round series with their offense and not hurt them defensively. It's just how can they be deployed on a regular basis where Milwaukee can still feel like, okay, the juice is worth the squeeze to have them, either one of them out there or both of them at the same time. Connaughton has given Milwaukee some nice games this year as well too, despite not being maybe as good defensively. So, listen, I am impressed, and while I know there's a lot to be said about this Bucks team and having to prove it, so to speak, in the playoffs, I think that the roster construction is not as bad as maybe we once thought. And imagine if they would have been able to get Bogdanovich too, right? Like that almost happened. So yeah, they got to do it. They got to prove it. But this is proving to be a pretty formidable team. Hanging here with this Brooklyn Nets team 106-104 as Holiday pulls up for three. No good, but a foul, loose ball foul on Durant here. Again, 106-104 Milwaukee, 7:24 left to go in another tightly contested Bucks and Nets matchup right here tonight, bro.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I got a question for you, Shaw. I'm bringing them out today, man, because, it's only right on, and as we witness part deux. Well, actually, it's actually part che, because this is the tiebreaker. Which of these teams do you think needs home court advantage throughout the playoffs?
It's a good question.
And let me throw Philadelphia into the mix because we're talking about, top three, obviously. So which of these teams do you really think need to have home court advantage?
The team I think who needs it the most is probably Philadelphia. Of these three, I think they'll probably need it the most because they've had, in some ways, they're coming off the most disappointing season. Now you can say Milwaukee getting shellacked by Miami last year was pretty damn disappointing, but they didn't get swept out of the playoffs. At least Milwaukee still won a first round. I think Philadelphia, given their history, newness of their coach and Doc Rivers, coming to that situation, and then just not having really had the opportunity to do it with this collective unit, every advantage that they can possibly get is going to be necessary. So them getting home court advantage is probably the most important thing to me. I think Milwaukee is probably second, with Brooklyn being least needy of home court advantage simply because of their star power and their star power's level of success, especially with Durant and Kyrie both having winning championships before and going into other people's gyms and telling them to shut the F up. So I don't think they're ultimately concerned about home court advantage. Well, obviously, they'll still be a top three seed no matter what. So, yeah, my answer is definitely Philly first, with Milwaukee coming in a close second behind that. What about you?
It's funny. I agree with you with Philadelphia, but I actually would flip the script a little bit between Milwaukee and with Brooklyn. So here's the thing. And then I want to touch on something real quick. Well, actually, let me touch on this now because me, I tend to go on my little tangent. But Kyrie Irving has been relatively quiet in the second half of this game, and I think that's something to kind of take into consideration what we're talking about, right, Shaw? Like, you put the right person on Kyrie Irving. You got the bulldog, Drew. You know what I'm saying? And this team is not as offensively effective, in the stretch, and it's probably going to be leaning a whole lot more on Kevin Durant to bail him out, right? But let me go back to the point we were just talking about before. The reason why I think the Brooklyn Nets need that home court advantage a little bit more is I know everybody, again, is enamored with the star power that is reflective of Brooklyn with Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. But, Shaw, if you really think about it, all three of these guys, while they've been tested and have had great performances, individually had not really shown a propensity to close out those game sevens. You know what I'm saying?
Say what?
So here's what I mean. You look at Kyrie Irving, right? Kyrie Irving played next to LeBron James. Kyrie Irving as himself has not shown that he is, the kind of person where you're like, hey, take us to the promised land, right? Kevin Durant played next to Russell Westbrook, but he really didn't kind of make his bones in being that dude as far as closing out in those game seven situations effectively the way we think until he started playing with the Golden State Warriors. James Harden, all right, Do we need to say anything about James Harden? He's burnt out. He's flamed out in critical games, right? This is going to be the first time that we see all three of them together doing this, right? And so I'm a little leery. I'm not saying that, to me, I feel like if you're Brooklyn, don't get to a game 7. Don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. And they're that talented that they may not need to. But I would be a little more hesitant about their ability to close out teams if they push them to a game 7, simply because the resume from them individually has not shown that without a star proven team that knows how to do it, they don't do it well by themselves. And you're asking all three of them to figure out a way to do that in this iteration of this season. To me, that's kind of a tough sell. For me, it's a tough sell. And everyone's going to be thinking, oh, Cal's out of his damn mind. Well, that's why I come up with Calspiracy theories. But my point is that I've never bought into Irving, Durant, and Harden on the same team to feel comfortable about them closing out games in high-pressure situations, because part of the reason why we got on them was because they couldn't do it without having greatness next to them. Now that they've had greatness next to them, it's going to be interesting to see what they can do on, in this iteration of it. But I digress.
I'm going to respond after we take a quick break. 115 to 106.
He's got one in the chamber, ladies and gentlemen. Charles got one in the chamber.
We'll be right back. Recommand this game, so to speak. Durant misses a jumper, and Bruce Brown, offensive rebound, gets the putback over DiVincenzo in the lane. Bruce Brown doing a really nice job for Brooklyn this year, as we talked about in the outset. Before we went to break, Cal went on one of his conspiracy theories saying he doesn't trust the Brooklyn Nets and doesn't think that this team is constructed to be as successful without home court advantage. And I guess I would have to harken back to when the Cavs came back down from 3-1, right? Kyrie was a major part of that in winning that championship. LeBron does not get that chip without Kyrie. Kyrie hit a big three in Game 7 to help the Warriors go down, if you will. I should say help the Warriors, but to send the Warriors down and help the Cavs to go ahead as Kyrie now knocks down a three here in the corner to make it 119-111, 3:20 left to go. In addition to Durant was an MVP without Steph Curry. The reason the whole thing in Golden State didn't last for years and years and years and years is because of Durant's maybe personal mentality. And I don't want to go so far as to say jealousy, but misunderstanding of how he could not take control of that team and the love of that city because Steph Curry was already there. He was still playing his best basketball. Durant going to Golden State was the best defense we've ever seen Durant play in his entire career up until that point. And that's how he got, multiple chips. So I think it's kind of harsh to say that, well, they haven't done it. They've both done it. While Durant did it on a super team, Kyrie did it on a super team, with Kevin Love and obviously LeBron as well too. And now because of the way they both maneuver, if you will, they wanted to now come and bring their collective talents together after going out and tasting success and learning, quote unquote, how to do it with other teams and other franchises and maybe even other superstars. And now they're like, all right, well, we're ready now to be the leaders and co-leaders of that situation. And by the way, let's bring the beard on as well too, and get him a chance to kind of do this. Right. My biggest thing about any of this is what every media member is harping on, but I don't fault them for it. The fact that Harden, Durant, and Kyrie have only played 7 games together. That is massive. And when the playoffs come and when defense is really focused in and you get in those dog days of a playoff series and you see that same team, 7 times in 10 days or whatever the hell it's going to end up being, shit can get rough. And the times where maybe you weren't as successful, potentially maybe that creeps into your mind a little bit. But they're so elite, and because they have each other to rely on, I'm not necessarily worried about that. Like, this isn't Paul George over here. You know what I mean? This is Kevin fucking Durant and Kyrie Irving, in addition to, an MVP, former MVP in James Harden as well too. So I'm not worried about them needing home court advantage to be successful. But again, to each his own. I think we definitely differ in opinions on that.
Yeah, look, I don't want to belabor the point, but I guess to make sure I clarify something in what I'm talking about, as it pertains to Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, because remember I said that Kyrie Irving deserved to be the MVP. I thought he was the MVP of that series, not LeBron James. Okay, it wasn't about Kyrie Irving not accomplishing it. It's what had to happen for him to be in the position to do that. Let's remember, Kyrie Irving was the guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers when LeBron went to go to Miami to go get them chips, right? And it was ultimately LeBron James who basically said, I'm going to come back as long as I do it with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, right? So what I'm saying is that that Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant had to, their environment, their circumstances had to change. And it wasn't because they went and did those things, right? Before, individually, that gave you room for you to believe, okay, they could just go anywhere and just basically do that. They had to transform themselves essentially, or maybe someone had to transform them, right? Kevin Durant's ability to be that guy transformed, yes, by playing with that super team. But that's why he's where he is now in Brooklyn. right? We would be talking about Kevin Durant as being the greatest offensive player in the world, like yada yada, right? But if he doesn't go to Golden State to transform himself to do what's necessary for him to win that chip, we don't see Kevin Durant in Brooklyn. We may see him in New York as a Knick, taking them for their money.
Wow, terrible pass. Well, yeah, I mean, I think you maybe at this point now we're in agreement. Like I said, they had to do it somewhere else to learn how to do it, and
Okay.
I think that they have, and I don't think you lose that once you get it. It's not something that just goes away. It's like how to win, you know what it takes
I
to
just
win.
think it's again a unique circumstances that it's all three of them doing it together on this court for this team and this franchise. That's all that I'm saying.
121-116 as Brooklyn has made a late push here. Durant now actually just missed back-to-back threes, after an offensive rebound gave him a second chance. 107 left to go here. Milwaukee turning the ball over here a little bit and maybe falling into the Brooklyn trap that we were talking about a little while ago, where, hey, they're sagging off of him, building that proverbial wall that you saw Miami do, and now he's trying to force himself into the paint where all the help is because he doesn't have the confidence to knock down the three or knock down even a mid-range jumper with the kind of game on the line. Giannis now going to line here too, which has not been his strongest of suits throughout his career.
Hey, did you see how pissed off Giannis was on that foul from Brown?
Well, doesn't want to go to the line.
I
think he's a little nervous.
Well, yeah, maybe that. But you know what? And I'm telling you, I think this is something that we should watch for. With the remaining games left, with Milwaukee and the attitude that Giannis takes. I don't want to say it's an act of desperation or determination. I can't figure out what type of word I would describe with this, but there definitely needs to be an edge with Giannis. I don't want to use the word nastiness, but there definitely needs to be an edge with Giannis. And maybe we're kind of start seeing it. Like he's getting tired of the nonsensical fouls or, not getting some of these calls or whatever the case may be. I want to see Giannis give it to dudes the same way he's basically been taking it. I'm not saying that he's Dwight Howard type nice guy, whatever, because I think there is a built-in, in him type thing. But I want to see him take it to another level a little bit and actually be even more intimidating, be even more fearful for dudes who actually try to commit those type of fouls or whatever the case may be. Because I know that someone's going to try and push his buttons. But I really think that it starts with him and trickles down for the rest of these guys. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to have to play physical. They can be as offensively nice like they always have been, but they're going to have to be physical. And I think it starts with the way Giannis takes fouls and gives fouls to cats.
It brings up an interesting scenario, I think, for me when it comes to guys of that physical ilk, if you will. Like, how sensitive can you really be about going in the lane and getting fouled and all that stuff like that too? Like, I don't know. To me, it's almost silly because, well, do you want people to just fucking cower and bow down? You're big as shit. You know what I mean? Like, so if you're coming in there, do you want them like, oh God, he's coming, let me just get out of the way? Like, yo, you're gonna have to take fouls and sometimes hard fouls as they try to stand up for themselves and keep you out of the lane. So it's kind of a catch-22 with me when it comes to that. When guys that are this physical, they get mad. And I know you're not saying, to get mad per se as much as to show like the proverbial dog, if you will. And I think Giannis maybe does lack that a little bit. Maybe he is slightly a little bit too nice. But if he starts to really, turn on the nasty a little bit, as he's 8 of 10 from the free throw line tonight. So that's, huge for them in a very close game here, 4-point game, 52 seconds left. Knocks down his 9th of 11th free throw.
I just want to see Giannis cuss out dudes in Greek or talk shit in Greek to him.
And he probably does. Like, that's why we would need that kind of like that on-court access to maybe really see what's being said on a regular basis. I don't get the sense that he's that nice. It's funny you brought up, the Celtics a couple of times on tonight's broadcast. And a lot of people get this sense that Brad Stevens is like this super nice coach. He was cussing guys out. He just does it quietly. He's not demonstrative, but it doesn't mean he doesn't get mad. And I feel like we don't necessarily know everything that we think we do about these players and these coaches in the NBA. As Kyrie gets stripped by Drew Holiday, big play by Holiday defensively to stop a potential Brooklyn run here.
That bulldog.
Yeah, big play by Holiday there, bro.
Shout outs to DMX, man. We be playing Get At Me Dog right now.
Looks like Brooklyn might be as far as a three with the shot clock winding down, no good. DiVincenzo offensive tap to Tucker, and that's actually gonna do it.
All right. So, real quick, Shaw. So, real quick, what do we take away from this? You know, final thoughts of our takeaways with regards to what we've seen from these two games between Brooklyn and Milwaukee.
Well, Milwaukee at home gets both wins. They beat a Brooklyn team without. Like I said, there's value there. And Brooklyn is still formidable without James Harden. So it's not like, oh, it doesn't matter. This still very much matters that they got it done. So I think what we saw from Holiday throughout the course of the two games, even DiVincenzo and the Milwaukee supporting cast, but I guess the big story is going to be Giannis because he did have over 30 in both games. And especially him shooting the free throw well tonight is massive. And that is something that if teams are looking to just say, hey, he'll be a 60 or 50% free throw shooter in the playoffs, and he's able to do 10 of 12 like he does tonight, or was it, I think it might have been 9 of 12. Either way, that's massive. That's really good. And I think Brooklyn feels good about themselves too, because they can just say, well, we didn't have James, and we probably, still have more room to grow in this as well too. So those are my great play from Giannis, great play from the supporting cast as well. And Brooklyn is probably just like, all right, cool. You know what? Like they were playing with house money, in my opinion, Brooklyn was. What about you before we sign off?
Hey man, these are positive signs for the Milwaukee Bucks. Even though the Brooklyn Nets scored 118 points, they were probably difficult points to be made. And the fourth quarter, their defense mattered. Showed up when it needed to. And you got to have games like that, especially against the better teams in not just the conference but in the NBA. It's the only way that you're going to know that you have confidence in the players that you have on the floor to execute during those critical stretches. So hats off to Milwaukee Bucks. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, obviously you do take solace in the fact that you're able to do this and you didn't have, James Harden, but I go right back to this whole thing, Shaw, about what defense is it that the Brooklyn Nets are rolling out. I feel like they're going to be playing reactive defense against the better teams. That's my concern. They're not going to have – I don't know. I'm not seeing where there's an actual game plan where they're imposing their will defensively against whoever it is that they're going to be playing up against. And that's something I would like to see.
They had a game plan. Let Giannis shoot jumpers. That was the game plan.
All right. So fine. But everyone else still shot the ball well. The Bucks still shot over 50-something%. So it can't just be that Giannis getting to the free throw line or just shooting those jumpers was going to be the only thing going on. I mean, if that was the case, then what the hell happened with DiVincenzo getting threes up and Drew Holiday shooting like 50% tonight and I think dropped like 26 or 27. Middleton dropping 20-something points. I guess to me, there has to also be another part of that equation that's supposed to amass in that effort for the Brooklyn Nets to be as good defensively against the Milwaukee Bucks. I only saw a third of it tonight. And again, I saw that same issue with them this past weekend when they lost on Saturday night against them.
Well, I think one of the keys to tonight's game is, as I peruse the box score, is Milwaukee out rebounding Brooklyn 6. More importantly, 15 offensive rebounds for Milwaukee there. DiVincenzo had 15 friggin' rebounds, 6 of them being offensive. So Brooklyn will definitely want to clean that up and not allow teams to get second chance opportunities against them on a regular basis, especially with them not being an elite level defensive team. You don't want to play defense twice on 2 or 3 times on a possession. So that's definitely something Brooklyn would want to clean up, especially if they end up playing this Milwaukee team in the playoffs at some point as well too. So well said, my guy. I think that's going to do it here for us. Brooklyn ends up taking 2 L's in Milwaukee over the course of the weekend.
Old Dirty Bastard's not happy about that.
Well, we end up having a good one, right? And that's important for our
I know, we survived. How about that? For half.
So tune in next week. Should be back next Tuesday. Probably doing. We'll decide. We make decisions on the fly here. First half, second half. See how we feeling. And we'll definitely get that information ahead of time. And so you guys have a chance to win some cash with the HotMic and their promotions as well too. But thanks so much for joining us here this evening. We look forward to catching you next time on the Baseline Live. Take care, everybody.